Good afternoon. My name is Tom Mitchell. As some of you may know, they call me Tattoo Tom. I'm the director of Stillbrave Childhood Cancer Foundation. I'm also a very aggressive, unapologetic activist for children with cancer and their families. This is actually my third TEDx talk. In my first talk, I presented you with a plethora of information, facts, and statistics about the state of childhood cancer research and treatment in these United States of America at that time. I told you the story of my daughter Shayla, her cancer, her death, and how Stillbrave came to be. In my second TEDx talk, I presented you with even more information, facts, and statistics about the state of childhood cancer research and treatment in these United States of America at that time. I introduced you to my young friend Natasha. She joined me up here on stage. Natasha was at the time battling an incurable brain cancer called diffuse intrinsic pontine glioma, or DIPG. DIPG is considered terminal upon diagnoses. In other words, once diagnosed with DIPG, there is no effective treatment available. None. No child has ever been cured of or survived a DIPG diagnosis. Natasha was no exception, and I miss her a great deal. In last year's talk, I told you the story about my road dog, Daniel. Daniel was at the time bravely battling a very aggressive bone cancer called osteosarcoma. I miss Daniel a great deal too. In last year's talk, I was very aggressive, I was loud, and I was very much in your face. And so was Natasha. We had hoped to capture your attention, America, but we failed to do so. Because you see, the current state of childhood cancer research and treatment in these United States of America today is no better than it was last year when Natasha and I gave our talk. And it's no better than it was the year before when I gave my first talk. And quite frankly, it's no better today than it was 30 years ago, long before TEDx talks were even a thing. And the harsh reality of the situation is it's on the verge of becoming much, much worse. There are currently huge administrative budget cuts looming that would catastrophically impact the already horribly underfunded National Cancer Institute, where childhood cancer research is already little more than an afterthought. So this year, just for the heck of it, I decided to take a little different approach to my TED Talk, a kinder, gentler Tattoo Tom, if you will. Hence the suit. But just exactly, thank you. But just exactly how is an aggressive, tattooed knucklehead like me, suit or not, supposed to calmly and serenely unpack the dynamics of private and government funding, research and development, initiatives, incentives, clinical trials, appropriations, and the politics behind it all? How am I supposed to unriddle the genetic and cellular inconsistencies and the some get better, some don't reality of children with cancer who are on the exact same medicines? Well, the truth is I can't. I don't know how. And that's a very difficult conversation for me to have with you, but an even more difficult conversation for me to have with myself. Because you see, I'm not qualified to be here. I'm not supposed to have been able to give one TED Talk on childhood cancer, let alone 3. I'm not a doctor or a researcher or even a small cog in the wheel and machinery of politics or big pharma. Nah, man, I'm just a dad whose daughter got sick. She got really sick and she died. So yeah, I'm not supposed to be here. I'm not qualified, but you know what? Here I am. I just keep showing up. And I just keep showing up. And as long as they let me, I'm going to keep showing up. So anyways, if you were to ask me, though, just what the solution is, how to get the average person like you and you and you, and the politicians and the corporations and the pharmaceutical companies who control the research funding to take creative ownership of the childhood cancer epidemic in this country, because make no mistake about it, regardless of what you've been told, it is an epidemic. One point I'd like to reiterate from last year's talk is that we lose the equivalent of 5 entire elementary schools of children annually to childhood cancer. That's right, you heard me correctly. 5 entire elementary schools of children gone. If that's not an epidemic, I don't know what is. But I digress. Rather than throwing the same old facts and tired statistics at you that have fallen upon deaf ears in my previous talks, let's instead take a look at just 2 simple words: empathy and sympathy, and the difference between the two. I think most of us would agree that we are very sympathetic towards children with cancer and their families. Sympathy, by definition, is to show compassion, sorrow, or pity for the hardships that another person experiences, encounters, or endures. Empathy, on the other hand, is actually putting yourself in the shoes of that person. Empathy is the first step in a creative problem-solving process called design thinking. Empathy is the first step in design thinking because it is a vital skill that enables us to feel and experience the same things that another person does. But let me ask you this. Just how exactly does one go about feeling the same things that a child with cancer or the parent of a child with cancer feels and experiences? Because you see, the medicines that we give our children to treat childhood cancer, well, it's not medicine at all. No, it's poison. And it causes our children to suffer the way that poisons do. So we as parents are put in a very uncomfortable position where we basically have to torture our children in the most horrific ways, ways that we would not even allow our military to do to prisoners of war. Now, it's important to note again, too, that chemotherapy was originally derived from mustard gas, a chemical warfare agent, deemed too inhumane to use even on our enemies in times of war. Yet they are the go-to medicines for childhood cancers? So while it's easy for parents of children with cancer to empathize with one another for the things that we force to do to our children, all in the name of making them better, and I guess to some degree, children with cancer could empathize with one another for the things that they've suffered and experienced, but it would be very difficult for somebody to truly empathize not having been in our shoes. In much the same way, it would be very difficult to truly empathize with one of our brave servicemen or women returning home from war if we had not been there in their shoes and saw what they saw and did what they did. Because you see, regardless of the outcome, just like veterans, parents of children with cancer and children with cancer are oftentimes haunted by the things that we've seen and the things that we've done. Depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, survivor's guilt is the norm for many of us too. Trust me, I know. Because you see, most, if not all of us, we weren't qualified to be there, yet there we were. I think I speak for most parents of children with cancer when I say that deep down, we really don't want you to empathize with us. We don't want anyone to feel or experience the same feelings that we did. Not anyone. Not ever. And I believe herein lies the ultimate disconnect that prevents childhood cancer from becoming a national priority in this country, in much the same way our veterans are not a national priority in this country. Impossible empathy. Though we may be sympathetic, the design thinking process is not going to solve this. Now, it's important to note that sympathy does sometimes bring people to a place of engagement and action. I know many people in the childhood cancer community who are extremely aggressive without having been directly impacted by having had a child of their own with cancer. People like Mike Gillette, Randy Gladstone, Annette Zarukian. There are such amazing people, but they are the rare and beautiful exception. And I certainly wasn't one of them. Neither are most of you. Let me tell you a story. Once upon a time, there was a king, and the king planned to visit one of his villages. The villagers were very excited about this visit, so in preparation, they built this beautiful, giant wooden barrel, and they were going to fill it with the finest wines. But there was a problem. Just where do you get that much fine wine to fill the barrel? Well, they came up with a brilliant idea. If each family in the town brought just one flask of their finest wine and poured it into the barrel, if everyone worked together for this common goal, it would be simple to fill the barrel. So they put the barrel in the center of town, and they put a ladder leading up to the top. And every day, the families would line up and pour their flask into the barrel. The day finally came when the king came for his visit. The villagers were so very excited to present him with this beautiful barrel. They showed it to him, and they poured from it a kingly goblet and presented it to the king. And as the king was drinking it, the look in his eyes went from happy to sad to angry, and he spit the liquid out. This obviously shocked and mortified the townspeople, and they asked him, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" And he said, "It's just plain water." You see, one family in the town had thought to themselves, why should we put our fine wine in that barrel? If everybody else is going to do it, we could just pour a flask of water in. No one would notice the difference. But the problem is, every family in that town made that same calculation. So nobody put wine in the barrel, but only water. You see, everyone was relying on someone else. So if you were to ask me just what the solution is, just how to get the average American, like you and you and you, and the politicians and the corporations and the pharmaceutical companies who control the research funding to take creative ownership of the childhood cancer epidemic in this country, because make no mistake about it, it is an epidemic. Well, the short answer is, I don't know. Okay, I'm not qualified to be here. I told you that. But yet here I am. I keep showing up year after year, day after day, no matter what. I show up. And you know what? I bring wine in my flask. Ask yourselves, what are you going to bring? Water or wine? Because, man, we have got to find a way to get you to change your water into wine. Because if nothing changes, nothing changes. This summer, I'm going to be running up a volcano to raise money and awareness for children with cancer because I don't know what else to do. This whole throw in the chair bit and screaming at the end, that's so you didn't forget just exactly how aggressive Tattoo Tom really is and how serious he really is when it comes to childhood cancer. Still brave, Shayla. Still brave, baby.